What happens when country music's biggest star sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to have the host dig into the one topic he never talks about? You're about to witness one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history, where years of buried tension finally explode into the open. This is the story of how a simple question turned into a career-defining moment that nobody saw coming, Kelly. Clarkson adjusted her earpiece as Blake Shelton settled into the plush chair across from her on the brightly lit set. The audience buzzed with excitement, phones already recording as the country superstar flashed his trademark grin. This was supposed to be easy, a friendly chat between two coaches who had shared years together on The Voice, promoting his new album and maybe telling a few behind-the-scenes stories fans would love. Blake Shelton, everybody, Kelly announced, greeted by thunderous applause. Her voice carried the warm familiarity that made her talk show such a hit. "It's so good to have you here. We've got so much to catch up on." Blake leaned back, completely at ease. "Always good to be here, Kelly. Thanks for having me. This place looks incredible. Way fancier than those spinning chairs we used to have." The audience laughed and Kelly beamed. "Oh, don't even get me started on those chairs. I still have back problems from spinning around so much. But speaking of The Voice, I have to ask you something fans have been dying to know." Something in her tone shifted, and Blake caught it. His smile stayed fixed, but his eyes sharpened. "Shoot, you know I'm an open book." Kelly leaned forward, her expression serious. "There's been a lot of speculation about what really happened during that last season we did together. The tension was pretty obvious on screen, and I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room." Blake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Kelly. We had a great time working together." "Always did." "Come on, Blake," Kelly pressed, her voice edged with steel. "We both know that's not entirely true. There were real issues behind the scenes, and I think our fans deserve to know what was really going on between us." The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras. Blake shifted in his seat, his easy demeanor starting to crack. "Look, Kelly, I came here to talk about my music, not to rehash old drama that frankly doesn't exist." "But it does exist, Blake," Kelly shot back. "And pretending it doesn't is exactly the problem. You made comments to producers about my coaching style that were completely out of line. Then you had the nerve to act like nothing happened when we were on camera together." Blake's eyes flashed. "Excuse me. My comments about your coaching style? Kelly, you spent half that season undermining my advice to contestants and making little digs about country music not being real music. You want to talk about out of line?" The audience was dead quiet now, sensing they were witnessing something raw and unscripted. Kelly's cheeks flushed, but she didn't let up. "That is not what happened, and you know it. I was trying to help those kids find their own voice, not turn them into Blake Shelton clones like you seem determined to do." "Blake Shelton clones?" Blake sat up straighter, his voice rising. "Kelly, I've launched more careers from that show than anyone else, and you know it. Just because I gave honest feedback instead of blowing sunshine doesn't mean I was cloning anybody." "Honest feedback?" Kelly's frustration was breaking through. "Blake, you told Sarah Mitchell her original song sounded like something a teenager would write in their diary. She was 17 years old. That wasn't feedback, that was cruel." Blake's face hardened. "Sarah needed the truth about this industry. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. Sometimes being a mentor means being tough." "Being tough and being mean are two different things," Kelly shot back. "And the way you talked about her after she left the room was even worse. I heard what you said to the other coaches." Blake gripped the arms of his chair. "And what exactly did I say, Kelly? Since you seem to remember everything from years ago." Kelly's eyes narrowed, her competitive fire blazing. "You said she didn't have what it takes to make it in Nashville because she was too soft, too emotional. Then you laughed and said maybe she should stick to writing songs for Disney movies, because at least they liked that kind of saccharine garbage." Blake's face went pale, then flushed red. That was a private conversation between coaches. We were supposed to be able to speak candidly about contestants without worrying about it being thrown back in our faces years later. "Private?" Kelly's voice rose, making the audience lean forward. "Blake, There are always cameras rolling. And Sarah was standing right outside the door when you said it. She heard every word. His composure cracked. How was I supposed to know she was there? And besides, it's not like I was wrong. Where is Sarah Mitchell now, Kelly? What happened to her big career? Kelly stood up from her chair, something she never did during interviews. She quit music, Blake. Completely. A 17-year-old girl who had been writing songs since she was 8 gave up her dream because of what you said. She works at a bank in Ohio now, and she hasn't touched a guitar since she left the show. Blake stayed seated, but his voice was louder now. That's not on me, Kelly. That's on her. If she couldn't handle one piece of criticism, then maybe she really didn't have what it takes. The music industry is brutal, and I was preparing her for reality. Kelly laughed bitterly. Criticism? You destroyed a kid's confidence because she didn't fit your narrow little box of what country music should sound like. That wasn't criticism. That was sabotage. Finally, Blake rose to his feet, towering over her. Sabotage? Kelly, I've spent my entire career helping young artists find their voice. I don't need to sabotage anybody, especially not some teenager who was never going to make it anyway. The audience gasped audibly at that remark. Kelly's jaw dropped. Never going to make it anyway? Do you hear yourself right now? Kelly's voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the sheer intensity of her anger. That girl had more raw talent in her pinky finger than half the artists getting radio play today. Oh, please, Blake scoffed, his filter completely gone. She had a pretty voice and could play 3 chords on a guitar. That doesn't make her the next Carrie Underwood. You always did this, Kelly. You fell in love with these sob stories instead of focusing on who actually had the talent to win. Kelly's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or hurt was impossible to tell. Sob stories, Blake? These are real people with real dreams, not just entertainment for your amusement. And for your information, I picked winners just as often as you did. Blake's laugh was harsh and cutting. Kelly, when was the last time you heard a song on the radio from one of your voice winners? I can name 3 of mine that are in the top 40 right now. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Kelly stepped closer to Blake, her voice dropping to a whisper, but the microphones caught every word. You want to know why you don't hear from my winners, Blake? Because half of them were so traumatized by the way you treated them during the live shows that they needed therapy before they could even think about performing again. Blake's eyes went wide. That is complete nonsense, Kelly, and you know it. I never treated anyone badly during the live shows. Everything was professional. Professional? Kelly's voice cracked slightly. Blake, you told Marcus Johnson that his version of a Stevie Wonder song was an insult to real music. You said it on live television in front of 12 million people. A 22-year-old kid who idolized Stevie Wonder his entire life, and you crushed him on national TV. Blake ran a hand through his hair, his confidence wavering for the first time. That performance was rough, Kelly, you can't deny that. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it needs to be said. The truth? Kelly shook her head in disbelief. Blake, that performance got a standing ovation from the audience. The only person who had a problem with it was you, and everyone knew why. Blake's body went rigid. And why was that, Kelly? Since you seem to think you know my motivations better than I do. Kelly hesitated for just a moment, as if about to cross a line she couldn't come back from. The studio held its collective breath. Because Marcus was getting more attention than your contestant that week, and you couldn't stand it. You had to tear him down to build your guy up. The accusation hung in the air like a bomb. Blake's face cycled through shock, anger, hurt, and finally settled on something cold and dangerous. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. I have never, not once in my entire career, tried to sabotage another coach's contestant for my own benefit. Then explain to me, Kelly demanded, crossing her arms, why every time one of my contestants started gaining momentum, suddenly you had something negative to say about them. Every single time. Maybe because your contestants had problems that needed to be addressed, Blake shot back. I wasn't going to pretend they were perfect just to spare your feelings, or theirs. Spare my feelings? Kelly's composure finally snapped. Blake, this was never about my feelings. This was about you being so insecure about your own coaching that you had to tear everyone else down to feel better about yourself. The words hit Blake like a physical blow. The mask of celebrity charm slipped, revealing something raw and wounded. Insecure? Kelly, I've sold over 10 million albums. I've had 27 #1 hits. I've been coaching on The Voice longer than anyone else. What exactly do I have to be insecure about? Kelly didn't flinch. All of that success, and you still felt threatened by a 17-year-old girl with a guitar and a dream. That tells me everything I need to know about where your head was during those seasons. Blake took a step back, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You think I was threatened by Sarah Mitchell? Kelly, that's insane. I was trying to give her realistic expectations about an industry that chews people up and spits them out every single day. By destroying her confidence before she even got a chance to try? Kelly's voice was steady now, controlled, which somehow made her words cut even deeper. Blake, there's a difference between preparing someone for reality and crushing their spirit. You crossed that line, and you did it on purpose. The studio audience was completely silent, many of them shifting uncomfortably as they realized they were witnessing something deeply personal. Blake glanced around, suddenly remembering where he was, and that millions of people would eventually see this. Kelly, I think we should probably wrap this up, he said, his voice quieter now. This isn't the kind of discussion that belongs on your show. But Kelly wasn't backing down. Oh no, Blake, you don't get to shut this down now. You came on my show, and we're going to finish this conversation. You owe those kids an explanation. And you owe me one, too. Blake's jaw worked silently before he finally found his voice. I don't owe you anything, Kelly. We worked together. It didn't always go smoothly, and now it's over. That's how this business goes. It didn't go smoothly? Kelly's eyebrows shot up. Blake, you made my last season on that show a living nightmare. Every decision I made, every piece of advice I gave, every song choice my contestants made, you had something negative to say about it. And it wasn't just to me. It was to the producers, other coaches, crew members, everyone. Blake's composure was hanging by a thread. Kelly, if you had a problem with my feedback, you should have talked to me about it then, not waited years to ambush me on television. I did talk to you about it, Kelly said, her voice rising again. Multiple times. Do you remember what you told me, Blake? You said I was being too sensitive, that I needed to develop thicker skin if I wanted to survive in this business. You dismissed every concern I raised. The memory seemed to hit Blake hard. For the first time, he looked away from Kelly, his gaze dropping to the floor. That's not... I don't remember it that way. Of course you don't, Kelly said bitterly. Because to you, I was just another coach who didn't understand how things really worked. But Blake? I had already won a Grammy and sold millions of albums before I ever set foot on that set. I didn't need you to teach me about the music business. Blake's head snapped back up, anger flashing in his eyes again. Then why did you act like you did? Questioning every decision, second-guessing every piece of advice, acting like you knew better than everyone else. Because I cared about those contestants more than I cared about winning a stupid competition, Kelly shot back. And apparently, that made me the enemy in your eyes. The accusation seemed to deflate some of Blake's anger. Kelly, that's not true. You weren't the enemy. We just had different approaches. Different approaches? Kelly laughed, but it was hollow and sad. Blake, your approach was to break down kids who were already nervous and scared. My approach was to build them up. If that's what you call different approaches, then I guess we really didn't belong on the same show. Blake was quiet for a long moment, the fight draining from him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Those kids needed to be prepared for what they were going to face out there. The real world isn't going to cuddle them the way you did. Cuddle them? Kelly's voice cracked with emotion. Blake, I gave them confidence. I gave them belief in themselves, and you systematically tore that down every chance you got. Do you have any idea how that felt to watch? Blake looked up at her, and for the first time since the conversation began, There was something like vulnerability in his expression. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just trying to do my job the way I knew how. Kelly stared at him for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, but still firm. Your job was to mentor Blake, not to judge. There's a difference. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that. Blake stood there in silence, the weight of her words settling over him like a blanket. The studio was so quiet that even the sound of someone shifting in their seat seemed unnaturally loud. Finally, Blake reached up and unclipped his microphone. I can't do this, he said quietly, his voice barely picked up by Kelly's mic. This isn't what I signed up for. Kelly watched as he fumbled with the microphone pack clipped to his belt. Blake, we can work through this. We can have an actual conversation about what happened and maybe find a way to move forward. But Blake was already walking toward the edge of the stage. Kelly, I'm sorry if I hurt those kids. I really am. But I can't sit here and be painted as some kind of villain when I was just trying to help them succeed. Blake, please, Kelly called after him, taking a few steps in his direction. Don't walk away from this. We can figure it out. Blake paused at the edge of the stage and turned back to face her one last time. Some things can't be figured out. Kelly, some bridges get burned and they stay burned. With that, he stepped off the stage and disappeared into the wings, leaving Kelly standing alone in front of a stunned studio audience. She stood there for a moment, collecting herself before slowly walking back to her chair and sitting down heavily. Well, she said finally, looking directly into the camera. I guess that's one way to end an interview. The camera held on her face for a long moment before she continued. Look, I know that was intense, and I know it probably wasn't what you expected when you tuned in today. But sometimes these conversations need to happen, even when they're uncomfortable. Especially when they're uncomfortable. She took a deep breath and managed a small smile. If you made it through all of that with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what you think about everything that just happened here. Do you think there was a way this conversation could have gone differently? Or was this confrontation inevitable from the start? I honestly don't know the answer to that question myself, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.